This is your host, and this is the next part of our series on Civil Procedure Code. And in this video, we'll learn about Order 21 of CPC, which deals with execution of decrees and orders. If you're new to this channel, I request you to stay tuned because here we discuss everything related to Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code, and now we are discussing Civil Procedure Code as well. Also, let's aim for 500 likes on this one. With that, let's begin. So far in this series, we learned about the origin of CPC, various preliminary decrees, how to file a suit, how to frame issues, how to adduce evidence, and some interlocutory applications. Now that we know how a civil case is fought, let's understand what happens after the case is won, because winning a civil case is just the beginning. The real battle often lies in getting the judgment implemented. That's where Order 21 of the Civil Procedure Code comes into play. It deals with the execution of decrees and orders, ensuring justice is not just declared but actually delivered. In simple terms, suppose there is a debt of 1 lakh rupees and the debtor refuses to pay, so the creditor files a lawsuit. The court decides that the debtor must pay the amount along with interest, but after the judgment, the debtor still says he will not pay. So what should the creditor do? This is where Order 21 steps in. It gives the creditor the tools to enforce the court's decision and collect the money. So first, let's understand what is execution in law. Execution means enforcing a decree or order passed by a civil court. When someone wins a case and the court grants them relief, like recovering money or getting property back, the person who won can file for execution if the other person does not follow what the court said. So Order 21 answers the question, now that I have won, how do I actually get what the court granted me? Let's look at what types of decrees can be executed. First, we have money decrees, like when a person owes you money and the court says they have to pay it back. Second, decrees for possession, like when someone wrongfully took your house or land and the court tells them to give it back. Third, injunction decrees. Remember the video where we discussed temporary and perpetual injunction? Yes, those preventive orders can also be enforced using Order 21. Fourth, specific performance decrees. What happens when someone doesn't finish their part of the deal as promised? The court can sometimes order them to complete it, and that order can also be executed under Order 21. So execution makes sure the remedy granted by the court actually becomes a reality. Now let's see how execution takes place under Order 21. It says the court can enforce a decree by doing things like attaching and selling the person's property, arresting and detaining the person who has to pay money, delivering the property back to the person who is entitled to it, or appointing a receiver to manage the property until the person who is supposed to take care of it does their duty. For example, if someone wins a case and gets a decree for money, the court may tell the person who has to pay to deposit the money in a bank account. Or if someone wins a case for property, the court might help them take physical possession of that property. But what if the person says they've already paid or doesn't have the property anymore? Well, no problem. Order 21 has that covered too. The person against whom the order is passed can object to it. They can say things like, I've already paid what I owed, or I don't have that property anymore. If the court thinks these objections are valid, it will modify or cancel the order. Also, a person who will suffer because of this execution can ask the court to stop it. They can say things like, wait, I have an appeal in another court, or you are trying to execute the order before my appeal is decided. The court will hear both sides and then decide whether or not to pause the execution. If you want to challenge an order passed under Order 21, you can go to a higher court for revision. Even the High Court has the power to revise any order passed under Order 21. Now let's look at how execution takes place in detail. A decree passed by a civil court can be enforced in several ways depending on the type of relief granted. For instance, if a decree calls for paying money, courts typically allow recovery either by attachment and sale of the judgment debtor's property or by arresting and detaining the judgment debtor in civil cases. When a decree calls for delivering possession of property, the court assists the decree holder in taking actual possession of the property. This might include houses, land, or any other type of property. For example, if someone wrongfully occupies your land and a court orders them to vacate and deliver possession to you, the court will help you regain control of that land. Sometimes courts appoint a receiver to manage property until the person who is supposed to take care of it fulfills their responsibilities. If a decree calls for doing something specific like completing a contract, the court can enforce it by having the person fulfill their part of the contract. To start execution proceedings, the decree holder needs to file an application with the court that passed the original decree. This application should clearly state the steps for execution the decree holder wants the court to take. Once the application is filed, the court will issue a warrant to the appropriate officer like a sheriff or a tehsildar to carry out the execution. The officer will then carry out the court's instructions and report back to the court. If there are any obstacles or difficulties during execution, the officer reports it to the court and both parties get a chance to present their views. If the judgment debtor tries to hide or dispose of their property to avoid execution, the court can stop them from doing that. The court can also stop anyone from helping the judgment debtor in hiding or disposing of their property. When property is attached for execution, people who have a claim on that property, like a mortgage or an unpaid vendor, can step in and show it to the court. The court then decides how to proceed based on these claims. If someone else has a legal claim on the property being used for execution, the court will consider that before taking any action. After a property is sold to satisfy a decree, the person who bought it typically gets the title to that property. However, if the sale price is not enough to cover all the dues, the person who bought it can ask the court to clear any remaining liens on the property. If a decree holder wants to enforce a decree outside India, they can request the central government to do so. The government then asks the court to pass a decree in a form that can be enforced in the country where the decree is sought to be enforced. When a decree is executed, the officer carrying out the execution keeps a record of it. This record includes details of the decree, the steps taken for execution, and all the payments made. Once the execution is complete, the officer sends a final report to the court. The court then closes the execution case and gives a certificate stating that the decree has been fully satisfied. If you've been following this series, you might wonder why hasn't the concept of limitation been discussed yet? Well, it's because Order 21 itself covers it. Execution of a decree has to happen within 12 years from when the decree was made. After 12 years, you can't enforce a decree just because you didn't do it earlier. There are some exceptions though, like if the person against whom the decree was made left India and came back later. In cases like these, execution can happen within 12 years from when they return to India. Throughout the execution process, both parties can ask the court to do certain things or stop things from happening. For example, if someone thinks the property being sold is undervalued, they can ask the court to stop the sale until the value is figured out. If you want to get rid of an order passed under Order 21, you can go to a higher court for revision. Even the High Court has the power to revise any order passed under Order 21. Well, that was a lot of information. Let's do a quick recap. Order 21 ensures court orders are carried out. If you win a case, this order helps you get what the court says you're entitled to. It covers various situations and types of court orders, like getting money, property, or even stopping someone from doing something. If the person who has to fulfill the court order doesn't do it, Order 21 lets you take action like getting their property seized or even having them jailed. But this order also makes sure that if someone says they've already fulfilled the order or if the court order is not right, there's a way to look into it and correct it if needed. So basically, Order 21 is like the last step of a game. You don't win the game until this step is done correctly. As always, the references and books used are added in the description. Thanks for watching, keep supporting us, and we'll keep making videos on your favorite legal topics.